At the time of the Louisiana Purchase, the mountain chain known as Appalachia divided the growing nation into two very distinct and separate regions, both geographically and economically. Merchants and settlers alike knew that something needed to be done to expedite transportation and jumpstart what would become national manifest destiny. John Quincy Adams wrote in 1811, "The whole continent appears to be destined to be peopled by one nation." Overcoming the Appalachian Mountains was the first step. The first truly successful breach was made in 1825 with the completion of the Erie Canal, an all-water route from the Great Lakes to the Atlantic. The success of this venture sparked a flurry of canal building that flooded the nation. And yet, in less than 30 years, it was all but over. Just as canals had replaced the wagon trails, railroads had replaced the canal routes. While railroads did have decidedly superior technological advantage, they were given a leg up by serious deficiencies in the canal system operations themselves. From before construction even began, to ongoing maintenance issues, to significant unforeseen crises, it can be said the Pennsylvania Railroad capitalized on, more than caused, the downfall of the Pennsylvania Main Line Canal. The Erie Canal successfully funneled traffic and trade into New York. With the advent of the canal, freight rates declined dramatically. Transportation charges, estimated to be from 15 to 25 cents a ton-mile by a wagon, were reduced to 5 cents or less by canal. The greatest advantage of the Erie Canal was that it bypassed the mountain range entirely, following what the New York Central Railroad would later call the water level route. Pennsylvania did not have the luxury of geography, but it wanted in on the canal craze just the same. The Erie Canal threatened to siphon business away from Philadelphia ports, so in March 1824, the citizen legislature of Pennsylvania passed an act that called for the appointment of 3 commissioners to view and explore a route for a canal from Harrisburg to Pittsburgh and from Philadelphia to the Susquehanna River. At a special canal convention in 1825, the official route to Pittsburgh was selected. But not everyone was on board with the canal plan. Pamphlets and newspaper editorials circulated through 1825 pushed for the creation of an all-rail route west. Others saw this new railroad technology as unproven and experimental. By January of 1826, a bill for the Pennsylvania Canal was signed into law. With an 82-mile canal section from Philadelphia to the Susquehanna River near Harrisburg replaced by planned construction of a Philadelphia to Columbia railroad. This was the first sign of the victor who would eventually swallow up the entire canal operation. From Columbia, canal boats would travel through a series of waterways and locks until reaching Hollidaysburg just outside modern-day Altoona. From here, the boats would be placed on a rail line with a series of 5 inclined planes up to the summit of the mountains and 5 planes back down the other side. Ironically, the canal company itself provided the evidence of the potential success of the rival railroads in this form of rail-based land bridge or portage over the mountains. The Allegheny Portage Railroad began construction in 1831 and was completed with a single track in March of 1834. During 1835, the second track was completed and the first locomotive put to use. Steam locomotives such as the Lafayette demonstrated that steam could pull trains of freight and passengers reliably, economically, and efficiently. The summit was 1,398 feet above the eastern basin, and a clearing was made 120 feet wide for the double set of tracks in order to avoid danger of tree fall on the lines. This portage railroad proved to be one of the most expensive portions of maintenance of the entire main line. So right now we're in the engine house at the top of the hill at the Allegheny Portage Railroad. And if you look right over here, you'll see the boiler. The boiler would have then heated up the water that went to the stationary engine, which is just across the way. This is a reproduction of it, but it's what it would have looked like. And the stationary engine with the giant flywheel, then attached with these gears, as you can see down here, to the hemp ropes. When the ropes went out to the tracks that we saw on the hillside coming up, it would tow the rail barges, the boats basically on rail carriers, up to the top of the hill with the stationary engine. And then the stationary engine would bring them into this position. Once they were here, they would be able to go out the back side of the engine house where a regular steam engine, similar to the Lafayette that we saw in the museum, would pick them up, take them on down the tracks all the way into Johnstown, where the canal boats would go back into the water for the trip the rest of the way to Pittsburgh. The inclined planes even included automatic derailleur safety trucks, which would catch and stop canal boats on rails should the rope break and they start to free fall down the hill. By the time all was said and done, it was 395 miles long, had 174 locks to maintain and operate, and cost over $16 million to construct. Now, while the canal commissioners may have grossly underestimated the cost of construction of the Main Line Canal, their assessments of its economic benefits to the region turned out to be correct. The canals reduced travel time between Philadelphia and Pittsburgh from at least 23 days to just 4. By 1831, the cost of shipping merchandise between Pittsburgh and Philadelphia had been reduced by over 35%, and the number of products shipped dramatically increased. Development was also seen in settlements and population growth. Small towns and cities sprang up all along the canal route. But all was not well. Maintenance and operation costs were eating into the revenues at an alarming rate. This did not include costs associated with damage from weather or accident. For example, on the 19th of June in 1838, a massive rainstorm over several hours flooded the Juniata River, sweeping away almost the entirety of the canal, dams, locks, and viaducts between Hollidaysburg and Huntington. Repairs delayed reopening until November of the same year. During this time, traffic on the Portage Railroad all but ceased, as the expense of operations exceeded the tolls collected for that segment. On the opening day of the 1839 season of operations, it was discovered that the wooden rails and sills on the planes of the Portage Railroad were so degraded from age and use that the entirety had to be replaced. 8 of the 10 inclined planes were not in a condition to pass traffic. Half of the cast iron chairs that held the rails had failed under load. Drainage was poor. Wooden viaducts were failing. Other maintenance expenses included upkeep of the animals used in towing the boats, frequent replacement of mile-long continuous loop hemp ropes on the inclined planes until the advent of braided wire, and the regular servicing of up to 12 steam locomotives used in operation on the rail portions. Debt was another economic hindrance on canal operations in practice. The building of the Main Line Canal and many other feeder canals across the state had led the state into massive debt. By the time of the Depression of 1842, that debt totaled over $33 million. This led to deferred maintenance on current operations and no funds for expansions, improvements, or state-sponsored rail projects. Only 4 years after the opening of the Canal Main Line, conventions were being held in the state capitol for the purpose of constructing a railroad the entire length of the state. The Pennsylvania state legislature appropriated money to survey a rail route from Harrisburg to Pittsburgh. Wildfire spread when the report of the survey team revealed that such a line could be constructed without the need for inclined planes, such as on the Portage Railroad, and only moderate grades, such as those found on the now famous Horseshoe Curve just west of Altoona. However, due to the previously mentioned debt load from the canals, the state was in no position to construct the railroad as a public works project. The legislature authorized the charter for the Pennsylvania Railroad Company in 1846, with the understanding that no state aid would be committed to the project. Local governments, however, could contribute and did so in an amount over $6 million of capital. The Commonwealth of Pennsylvania also placed provisions in the charter to protect the floundering canal system, imposing a tonnage tax on rail traffic during warmer weather when the canal would be operating. But by 1854, the railroad had bypassed the Portage Railroad and Canal completely via the all-rail route. 3 years later, the entirety of the canal route, including the Philadelphia and Columbia Railroad, was sold to the Pennsylvania Railroad for $7.5 million, and the Allegheny Portage Railroad was scrapped. As noted previously, even from the beginning of canal operations, problems existed in construction costs, overruns, maintenance, repairs, and debt. Canals suffered from premature obsolescence, and many canals, the Main Line included, were reduced to unprofitable levels before the initial capital investment could even be repaid. Many canals would have financially failed even without the railroads. Therefore, responsibility for their failure cannot be laid exclusively at the feet of rail operations. Yes, railroads did have distinct advantages. Trains were significantly faster than canal boats. Canals froze during the winter months, prompting boat owners to live aboard them over winter or lock up and go home till warmer weather. Railroads required fewer workers per ton of freight compared to canals. They could be built in more direct routing, avoiding floodplains and waterways, and could be easily integrated with other railroads via car interchange. Railroads were almost universally privately owned in the United States, and therefore not subject to the inefficiencies and political whims of state-sponsored projects. It can be demonstrated from the historical records that the Pennsylvania Main Line Canal system was already suffering under financial burden and operational self-destruction long before the Pennsylvania Railroad was even chartered and constructed. Therefore, while the railroads most assuredly capitalized on the failing of the dying and bloated canal operations, it did not fire the initial economic shots that killed the Main Line Canal. Those wounds were self-inflicted. The Pennsylvania Railroad purchased the Main Line Canal in 1857 and continued to operate sections of it for freight. They operated these sections until 1901, when the canal was finally closed, the final section in the Harrisburg area. This closed the chapter on the Pennsylvania Main Line Canal, and very few of the remnants of that canal exists today.